All right, guys, welcome to episode 7 of the Strong Father Code podcast. Appreciate you guys being here. Quick favor before we get started. So today, this is race week. So I have my half Ironman, first big race, big event of the year. Very excited. Want to spend today kind of going through what I'm doing to prepare for the race. I know a lot of guys listening might either have a race on the calendar. I know some of you are my athletes. We'll obviously talk about this in depth as it relates specifically to you and your events, but I just kind of wanted to give maybe some insights on, as someone that's done a lot of these events, both triathlons, running races, I swam in college, have definitely had my fair share of getting to a start line and feeling varying levels of pressure to perform and specific goals. So kind of want to share what I've learned, what my approach is, what nutrition looks like, training looks like, taper looks like. I actually just got an email from my coach, the coach that I work with. So share some of the insights that he's giving me as I prepare for race day. And yeah, just give people kind of a behind the scenes look as we are a few days away from my first half Ironman of the year. But the favor I wanted to ask you is please, please, please. I know that people are listening. I hear from you guys all the time. I know that there's actually a very surprisingly significant group of you listening, but I know that not all of you have either subscribed, whether it's on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. So please, it helps the show so much. I'm a one-man show right now. I'm recording the podcast. I'm getting back to everyone on Instagram. I have my clients, having calls with potential athletes. So there's a lot going on, and I would appreciate nothing more than if you can just subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review. But yeah, let's talk about race week. So my two kind of big races for this year are this half Ironman and the marathon in May kind of being the big one. Now, if anyone's been following on social media, I did have a little bit of an unfortunate setback. My right foot just gives me all sorts of injuries and issues. And unfortunately, while everything was like humming along 100% perfect, I had there's like some specific scientific names for it, but I had some like the top of my foot got pretty irritated 3 weeks ago. Luckily, it ended up not being a stress fracture. That would have been worst case scenario. It ended up just being like the soft tissue there. And I think it was essentially just, and I've talked to a couple of you guys that I work with about this. Sometimes there isn't like a specific workout. It doesn't even slowly come on like, hey, this thing has been getting worse and worse and worse. Sometimes it's just you do one workout, you've been feeling great, progress has been going in the right direction, and just something happens and you get some sort of injury. Tweak a knee, tweak a back, Achilles tendonitis comes up, like you get some sort of flare up. And in those cases, and I think that this is very much what happened to me, it's just, how stress manifests itself. Something has to give when you're burning the candle on both ends. And for some of us, that happens intentionally. For some of us, that happens unintentionally. Intentionally, you could be training super hard, not taking enough recovery, pushing it on little sleep, ignoring the little yellow flags, red flags that tell you to take an extra rest day, take an extra day to sleep in, whatever it is. And if we push a little bit too hard, something eventually gives. And outside of our control, sometimes we're just in a season of life where work is crazy. There's a lot of stress. You have unexpected water damage and all of the, logistics and financial implications that come with something like that. That's, what I went through. And I tend to be a pretty easygoing guy. I'm not someone that, I think spins out of control when life throws me a curveball. I think I have a really good grounding practice of gratitude. I've shared this in the past, praying every night has been just a game changer. Just having this very simple practice of finding something to be grateful for and sharing that with my son has been, a really helpful just mindfulness practice for me. So all those things I think absolutely help me. And I'm not someone that I think outwardly is like, oh my God, I'm so stressed. But that being said, and I share this because I think that for a lot of people, but guys specifically, it might not on the face of it feel like you're dealing through this very stressful time. But if you're not sleeping where you usually sleep, that's a stressor, whether that's because of travel or being displaced for a while. If you're constantly thinking about financial implications of hey, I left my full-time job. I'm an entrepreneur now. Like there's the uncertainty of that. Then insurance isn't going to cover this. We have to make sure that we pay for this. Like the construction project is going to go over budget. Like all of these things, even though, in my case, sharing my case, like none of it by any means, we're very blessed, very fortunate, is like oh my God, I don't know what we're going to do. But just constantly being in that state of thinking, okay, what's the plan for next week? What's the plan for next month? What's the plan here? What am I moving around? So on and so forth. That's also a stressor. And none of those, being out of the house, sleep routine being out of whack, the kids' routine being out of whack, none of those alone would be something that you're like, wow, like things are crazy right now. But it does all add up. And the more I think back on this specific injury, how it came on, and the impact it had, even though you obviously can't know for sure, I'm fairly confident that it was kind of exactly that. I was training very hard. Everything felt really good. And when things feel good, like I push it that much harder. Like I felt like I was making so much progress on my runs. I was like completely, like I was hitting every single pace that my coach prescribed. And here's another mistake. And I know that some guys listening fall under this personality type. I've always been one. And this is actually why having a coach has been extremely valuable for me, because he does keep me in check from time to time, because I'm the type of guy that if you tell me to hold a pace and I can hold a faster pace than that, that's what I'm going to do. Because to me, it feels like, hey, I'm that much ahead of the game. I'm doing that much more. And any good coach will tell you, I will tell you, but I don't listen to my own advice very well, that isn't actually the point. And if you have a coach that's worth his salt and really understands how he's programming for you and what he's giving you to do, there's intention behind all of that. And some days aren't meant to max out and push to the limit. And I've learned that, to varying extents, the easy way or the hard way. But I share all that to say that during the season, I was feeling so good that I was hitting every workout really hard. Like I was hitting these track workouts on Wednesday, which are so much fun, and I've dearly, dearly missed, like really, really hard. And I have no one to, I don't know if blame's a harsh word, but the responsibility definitely falls on me there. And hindsight's always 20/20 to not try and be a little bit more conservative in exactly the way that I would, consult an athlete to do. Hey, we have these two races coming up. Training has been going so well. You're out of your house. You're not sleeping the same. Stress is a little bit higher. Like everything is kind of thrown for a loop. Now might be a time to just make sure that you're taking everything a little bit more conservatively. And of course I didn't do that. And I think that that's why I ended up where I ended up, which is with this foot injury that has kept me out of running. I started running again, luckily. So I'm going to have 2 weeks of running, more like run-walk intervals, but we're getting back. The pain is completely gone. I'd say that I feel like a little bit of foot tightness. I actually want to look up because I keep saying like forefoot irritation, and people might be curious like what I actually had. This is officially diagnosed by ChatGPT, so it's 100% correct. You should see my thread. The name of the thread is Stress Fracture Pain Explained. And I have like a running thread about the injury because I was updating it on how I was feeling every day, and it was giving me like little things to do and stuff. Originally, I thought it was a stress fracture. Luckily, it wasn't. What is the name? So the pain is gone. I have a little bit of tightness in the foot, but man, it just feels like, and I know that this will come back pretty quick, but the more frustrating thing about getting back into running is it's just like, I feel all the like little aches and pains of like getting back into running. Like my other foot has like a little bit of shin splints. Like I'm getting like little blisters, like all the things that you like work, anyone that like has been very into running and then gotten back into it. I'm like getting over that hump again, and it's just pretty frustrating. Let's see, what does it say? Extensor tendinopathy, or extensor tendon strain of the forefoot, most likely involving the extensor digitorum longus tendon over the second and third metatarsal. That's what I had. Essentially, if you want to put a clean label on it, dorsal forefoot extensor tendon overload, which, is one of those things that unfortunately is common. Plantar fasciitis is the worst, and I don't wish it on my worst enemy. It's such a frustrating injury, anything foot related, because there's such limited blood flow to that area, because it's impossible to stay off your feet. Like, sure, you cannot run, but you have to do things and be a human and keep up with toddlers, and being time on your foot is still gonna delay that getting better. So anyway, because it was that same foot, I'm sure that had something to do with it too, with where these other areas of my foot were probably being overworked with protecting or guarding the plantar fasciitis pain, which is something that I dealt with last year and got better. So anyway, it is one of those very unfortunate things where, when you have a foot injury or just like a lower body injury, especially if it's one foot versus the other, it's likely that it'll turn into other little things here and there, or more likely that, you'll be predisposed to those things. So had that injury, had to take 4 weeks off of running, unfortunately. Have now been running for 2 weeks, just, run walk intervals, trying to get back into a little cadence. And I have my half Ironman coming up this Sunday. So going back to where I was starting, my 2 races that I have registered this year, this was always kind of like a B goal race. I did my first half Ironman last year. So for anyone that doesn't know, I did triathlons at a pretty high level in my 20s. And I only competed in Olympic distance triathlons then. So that's usually just under a 1 mile swim, sometimes like a 0.9, 0.8 mile swim, a 40 kilometer bike run, which I believe comes out to 24.6 mile bike. So where I was, how competitive I was, that was about a 1 hour bike ride, and then a 10K run, which is a 6.2 mile run. That was the distance that I qualified for Age Group Worlds, raced in London in 2013, had so much fun with the sport of triathlons then, really enjoyed that early success. Never had a coach back then, was 100% self-trained. Thinking back on it, I trained like such an idiot. I would essentially just run as hard as I could a couple times a week, bike as hard as I could a couple times a week, and wouldn't really swim until right before my race, since I have a swimming background, and didn't really lift that much, if anything. I was a skinny string bean back then. But yeah, I was good at it. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed racing. I would get so nervous before these races. I didn't know, anything about sport-specific nutrition. I was taking 2 or 3 gels only when I raced, and it would completely just abolish destroy my stomach. I think it gave me a boost during the race, but I can't remember a single race when I was in my 20s that I wouldn't end up just spending most of the rest of the day when I raced sitting on the toilet. And now, knowing everything I know, it's just so dumb, because I never trained with any gels or any nutrition, and then I would just be like, oh, I'm saving this boost for when I race, which I know is a common mistake that a lot of people make, and definitely a mistake that I made in my 20s. So all things that I've corrected. But I used to do triathlons at a high level in my 20s. I got really into CrossFit after that. I tried to get as strong as I can. At the time, I believed that hey, you have to pick one or the other, endurance or strength, and went all in on strength and trying to be good at the sport of CrossFit. But recently, starting when my wife was pregnant with our second, I started running again, simply because I was pretty anxious at the time, and running just became this outlet, since I wasn't sleeping anyway, to go out early morning and immediately calm down that anxiety, and I started sleeping again, which, the mental health benefits of exercise is something that, maybe I should dedicate a whole podcast to, or it'd be interesting to have a guest to talk specifically about that. But that was a game changer for me then. And then starting to run again, I got into running specific goals. I wanted to run a marathon. Unfortunately, because of injury again, I ended up getting back into triathlons and did my first half Ironman last year. That was an incredible experience. I was 100% just bit by the bug again. And I was like, man, where's this been all my life? I was so happy to be back. I had sold my bike. I bought a new bike. Had an incredible race minus a 40-minute technical on my bike where I got a flat tire, went to change said flat tire in the panic of changing a flat tire, which I can do, which again, if you're racing for a half Ironman, and for, the athletes I work with, this is definitely something we're going to go over. You should absolutely have practiced and understand how to change a flat tire. Like, the bike and the race in general is long enough to where, a 3 to 5 minute conservatively flat tire fix is by no means going to ruin your race. Now, if you're a bozo like I am and you're panicking and sweaty and trying to rush it, which don't do it, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and you lose the end cap to the skewer to put your tire back in, then you will get stuck on the road for 40 to 45 minutes, which is what happened to me until, a support car was able to stop by and let me borrow an extra skewer, so the piece that holds my tire in place. So that's what happened to me last race. It was a bummer because I was on pace to have like a 2 hour and 20 minute, 2 hour 25, let's say conservatively, bike split. And I got my flat tire like 3 miles from the end of the course, which is such a bummer. It's kind of one of those days for anyone that's raced that just felt like my day, like everything was going my way. Felt so good, felt so ready to take on that run, and unfortunately didn't happen. I still finished the race and finished, in a good I believe my final time was 5:45, even given the big, time that I spent on the side of the road. And it's always impossible to tell, like, would my run have actually been faster if I had gone straight through? Some people could argue that I had 40 minutes of quote unquote rest. It didn't really feel like rest. I was like trying to find this stupid end cap through, some tall grass and trying to get my wheel back on. I didn't hydrate at all during that time. I didn't fuel at all during that time. I was just trying to get back on the road. So I would like to think, and of course I'm biased, that had the flat not happened, it wouldn't have just been like those 40 to 45 minutes lost that literally I was on the side of the road. I'd like to think that I would have then had a much better run because I would have just gone right into it, wouldn't have had the like stop and start and felt all tight and all of that stuff. So my final time was a 5:45, which is respectable. For anyone that's done a half Ironman. It wasn't up to par to obviously where I wanted to be. I think that, without the technical, I would have been right about sub 5 hours, which was my goal. So now it's redemption time. That's all I want. And I know that this hasn't been my A race. I haven't been able to run as much as I'd like. In terms of biking, I've done one outdoor bike ride. So last weekend I went out, I did 65 miles. For the first 56 of those 65 miles, I clocked in at a 2:33, which on its own is a respectable bike split. So I was very happy with how that went. I actually filmed like 5 videos for a paid ad campaign. So if you, and I'm sure you do, if you see any of my paid ads on Instagram where I'm like talking to my phone as I'm biking, I want you to know that that was filmed during my 2:33 bike split on a training ride. So I do this 12-mile loop by my house, and I was like, all right, I have to film 5 videos for this ad campaign. The night before, I in my head was like, all right, here's what I want to hit on every video. While I was biking, I was like thinking about, all right, how am I going to say this? How am I going to say this? And then in a strip of road on the back half of the loop where it's like, there's no cars there and it's fairly flat, I pulled out my phone every lap and recorded the video. Actually, the ad campaign isn't doing that bad. I have a call with a potential athlete tomorrow that came from those ads. That'll be a fun story in and of itself. Get an athlete from a marketing campaign that I filmed while I was doing this ride that honestly was a pretty good ride. Anyway, just an example of the multitasking that happens when you're time constrained entrepreneur training for a half Ironman and trying to build a coaching business. But that's a little tidbit. If you see those videos, I'm wearing that like white jersey with yellow sleeves. That was filmed during that 2:33 ride. So, hey, at least I still have the bike handling skills to, be able to do all that, pull my phone out, get the camera going, record a video, put it back. So I did that training ride last week, 2:33 for the 56 miles. Very happy with that. So even though I haven't been running as much, I've just been hammering training on the bike, feeling really good. That's the other tidbit that I'll share is I've done because I've only done one outdoor bike ride, I've done all my bike training on a C2 bike erg, which I would just like to share is such an incredible tool. I think that there are pros and cons, obviously. Well, not pros and cons. I think that in an ideal world, having the bike that you actually race in hooked up to a trainer like a Swift or, some sort of, they have such fancy ones now where you can do structured bike workouts with specific power targets and, indoors where you don't have to deal with the variables of being out on the road and safety and finding like a stretch of road long enough for you to do intervals and tempo stuff, all of that, without any of that being a concern, you can get really fit. And the proof is in the pudding, training on just a simple bike erg, which I think just underlines, one thing that I feel very strongly about, which is it's so not about the gear. The world of triathlons and running to an extent now with carbon plated super shoes, people get very caught up in the equipment, very caught up in the supplements, very caught up in like the things that you can throw money at. And at the end of the day, it's your preparation, your training, it's the engine that's really going to make or break. One of my favorite parts about the last half Ironman I did, and I'm looking forward to that experience again, I love nothing more than on the bike course, passing guys that I know are riding like $10,000 machines, because I love my bike. I got a great deal on it on Facebook Marketplace, but it's like an old Orbea triathlon bike. Yes, it's carbon. I don't have race wheels on it. I bought it for $1,000, and some of the bikes that are going to be out on this course are easily, $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 machines, especially once you take into consideration the race wheels that people have on it. So to pass guys on bikes that expensive is always just a nice feeling for me. But highlight the fact that, especially for anyone listening that wants to do their first race, I mean, even if you're trying to put down a really solid sub 6 hours, sub 5:30, sub 5 hour time, it's not the gear. And if you have the budget for it, great. Obviously there are benefits to getting a nice new, very aerodynamic bike. I mean, if money wasn't in any way a limiting factor for me, I would love to have like a really nice dialed in bike. But, it's not necessary. And it's especially not necessary if you're trying to get out there and do your first race. So that's a tidbit that I definitely want to share. I've done almost all my training. I did most of my training for Waco last year, where, again, I was going to finish my bike at a 225. And I can say that confidently because the split happened like 3 miles away from the finish line. So I know what I was on pace to hit. But I did that training almost exclusively on a C2, and obviously doing a lot of strength training that, I'm a big believer in and that I help all my athletes with. That's very specific to translate into performance on the bike and on the run. We do a lot of single leg stuff. We do a lot of lunging. We don't shy away from doing squatting. We don't shy away from doing very hard and intentional lower body training, even though we're layering on top of biking and running. And there's a way to do that that makes sense and, is going to help with both performance and injury prevention. So all that being said, I feel really good on the bike. And I wouldn't even say that I would feel that much better if I had done more outdoor rides. In an ideal world, yes, I would have loved to have had like 3 or 4 of those training rides like I did last week going into this. But, given the time that we spent out of the house, again, given the fact that, this race is so much earlier in the year and it's honestly been really cold, and I don't think I would have wanted to bike outside even if I would have had the opportunity to. And given the fact that, we got slammed by a pretty bad stomach bug the last couple of weeks, because I was planning to have 2 weekends to get outside and ride my bike. But the week before this past weekend, I was out for the count with a pretty bad stomach bug that the kids brought home. So given all that, I think that the bike is in a place to where, barring any crazy wind conditions, like if all things even between Waco and Galveston, which I'm doing now, I think I should have an equal, if not faster, bike ride. And I think that puts me in a really good place to both have a good time, even though I haven't been running as much, and be pretty competitive in my age group. That's kind of my hope. Swimming also feels a lot better. I've been swimming more consistently this prep than I was last. Part of that being that, since I haven't been able to run as much, I've just, been filling in the gaps with swimming and biking. Have access to an indoor pool this time. I ended up joining a community center the next town over in New Braunfels. Funny story about that. I go early in the morning, twice a week, usually like Mondays and Fridays, maybe Mondays and Wednesdays. And that's when the Masters team there practices. And the Masters team at Das Rec is essentially these like 4 to 5 like older ladies, and they're the sweetest. And they talk to me and they're like, "Oh, are you racing? Like, when's your next race?" And one of them is going to be volunteering at a penalty tent, so hopefully I don't see her in like an official capacity. So she's going to be volunteering at the tent where if you get caught drafting, so if you're too close to another cyclist on the bike course, there's refs that are riding around in motorcycles. They'll give you a penalty, and then you have to go sit in the penalty tent for, I don't know, 1 or 2 minutes. Has never happened to me. But she's going to be volunteering there. So that group, which has been just like the nicest, sweetest group of ladies that I see in the mornings when they're swimming, is going to be there. I think a few are doing it as a relay. So have definitely made some friends in the training process. Last cycle, when I was training for Waco, I did all of my swimming like exclusively alone. So that's been kind of like a nice little added tidbit. I'm like the least social person in those respects, in that, like, when I go swim in the mornings, like I'm trying to get in and get out. Ariel, my wife, is like the complete opposite. She says that when she goes to the gym alone, she like won't even wear headphones because she wants people to talk to her. And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, no, thank you. I'm giving every sign of like, please do not talk to me. And even through that, these ladies have cracked me, and yeah, I've gotten to know them a little bit, and it's going to be fun to see them there on the course. They were like, "We're going to be there. We're training. We're going to be cheering for you." So that's been a fun little tidbit of that. This training block has been making some friends at the pool. So swim feels better. Bike feels better. Run is going to be a wild card. What I'm banking on, what I feel good about, is the fact that, the runs at the end of these races, I'm sure this isn't the case for like the uber competitive guys. Even if I was in tip-top shape, like, you just get to the point where you're not going to be pushing like a very aggressive pace at the end of this race, or I'm not. So that to me feels, or at least it helps me feel a little bit better about the run. Also in Waco, it was so hot on the run that I was dealing with some pretty bad cramping. And I think that would have been the case whether I had the 40-minute mechanical where I wasn't taking in any nutrition or not. So given the fact that the weather is going to be a little bit more tame here, both, that's going to be less dehydrating on the bike and then definitely less dehydrating on the run, I feel pretty good about being able to maintain hopefully close to, if not honestly faster, of a run that I did in Waco. So I'm obviously optimistic here, but I think that swim, I want to do better than I did in Waco. Bike, I'll say the same. I think that if I could do the same of what I was projected to do if I hadn't had the flat tire. So if I'm swimming like a 30-minute 1.2 mile, if I'm biking a sub 230, like let's say 225 to 230, and then I'm running a 145, I feel good about being well in the 450s, maybe challenging like 445. Let's see, half marathon pace calculator. Do this in real time with you guys. Man, so my goal for the marathon was 255. I think I've kind of gotten to the point now where I'm given the time off of running. I still have 8 weeks after this half Ironman to train for the marathon. My goal was a 255. I think now it's just like, if I could break 3 hours, I will be happy. But that's a 6:52 pace. So to give you an idea, I think that, if I can run an 8:01 pace, which is a 1:45 half marathon at the end of this race, and I'm under 2:30 and right around 30 minutes for the swim, we're looking at a 4:45 total time, which I would be over the moon about that performance, kind of given where we're at. So that's the goal. And obviously there's transition times in there. In Waco, there was a really, and this is the thing, different courses will have different distances between certain transitions. So there was a really long run from where you got out on the swim in Waco to the transition area. And that obviously will balloon up your transition time. Here, it looks like it's much closer. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's just extra distance that I have zero interest in covering. So that seems to be a benefit here. A big X factor when it comes to like specific time goals is the wind. So Galveston is obviously right on the coast. Every review that I've seen about the course, everyone that I've talked to has mentioned the wind being just like a huge X factor. Now, I have no problem if I know that I'm going to have, like, say, a tailwind on the way out, a headwind on the way back. That's actually not ideal. I would love to have a headwind on the way out, tailwind on the way back. It seems like what's more likely is in reverse, though. But what would be a bummer is just like a really heavy crosswind the whole time, because then you're never getting the benefit of having the wind on your back, and you're just having to fight, a wind kind of trying to throw you off the bike the whole time. So that would be worst case scenario. And I could see that slowing down my bike time quite significantly if the wind is pretty heavy. So that could be an X factor. Definitely, one of the things you always have to consider in these events is preparing for the elements and the road. I do think that some people do themselves a disservice if all you're doing to prep for any triathlon is swimming in the pool, biking on an indoor trainer. And I think running, most people do get outside, but maybe not getting outside when it's hot or at the temperature it's going to be midday when you're actually doing the run, when you're doing a triathlon, because there's so much, pool, open water, night and day. Like, you have to get some open water practice, especially if you haven't done open water before, especially if you're not a super comfortable swimmer. Like, the swim sets the tone. Like, even aside from you not making the swim cutoff and not being able to finish your race, the swim being a stressful, potentially dangerous situation because you haven't prepared enough is something everyone doing a triathlon has to get in front of. And I'm very fortunate. I swam in college. I'm very comfortable in the water. And even for me, I remember the swim that I did for Waco, I was like 2/3 into it maybe, but I remember just feeling like I've been in the water for a while and I was so ready to get out of there. And again, never felt in danger, never felt uncomfortable, but I remember there was a couple times where I was like passing people and I like swallowed some water because people are like kicking in your face. Yeah, I remember thinking about it during that race. Like, I can imagine someone that has only done pool or not really had too much open water exposure, and then you get in, you have all these people around you, you have to look up and sight against the buoy, you don't have that blue line under you, and then you swallow a little bit of water. I can so see that easily snowballing into a pretty stressful, anxiety-inducing part of your race. And if you don't have the tool set even then to either go on your back, do a little bit of breaststroke, kind of like bring your heart rate back down, I could see it being somewhere where like that in itself can ruin your race day, maybe potentially want you to pull out of the water, like whatever it is. So I definitely encourage anyone thinking about a triathlon, prepping for one, to get very comfortable in the pool and find some way to get some practice in open water. And if you have any questions about like how much of that practice should be, or how to find somewhere to do open water, or anything that I can help with, just reach out on Instagram, and I'm happy to help. And obviously for the guys that I work with, it's something that we have conversations about and that we'll plan around by finding, some tune-up races to do leading up to your big race, doing a sprint before, doing an Olympic before, or just finding ways to get in the open water before. For the Waco race, for anyone that's thinking about doing that, which is in October, they actually do in September a open water swim. I forget what it's called, but it's on the Brazos River. That's the exact course for the triathlon. So that's always something that I recommend people doing that race because I mean, what better opportunity to get comfortable than to go out there and do the exact course in the exact body of water. So something to think about there. So feel good about the swim, feel good about the bike, and I feel as okay as I can about the run. In terms of being competitive, when I was looking at the Waco results, and had I, like, if you just subtract the 40 minutes, and had I run every other part of that race the same, I would have been kind of like knocking on the door of top 10 in my age group. So that part excites me because even if it's a super windy day, that makes the conditions difficult for everyone equally. We're all out there biking in the same wind. So I'd like to be competitive in my age group too. I have this goal that's maybe a little bit more long term of qualifying for Worlds in the 70.3 distance. And that's all based off of how you place relative to the other people in your age group. I don't necessarily need it to happen this race. I'm not expecting it to happen this race, but just knowing that I'm within shouting distance of being, top 10, top 5, kind of like, up there in the age group would be really fun, especially because, and this is where the hybrid athlete in me is what makes this kind of training so fun. So I posted on Instagram, I just finished the 4-week bench cycle. So like my big goals for this year are to run that sub 3 hour marathon, but also bench over 300 pounds. I think that like this idea of, these two competing goals per se, that, benching 300 isn't going to help me run a faster marathon. Running a faster marathon isn't going to help me bench 300. I like chasing these in tandem. And I think that, if I'm able to do that this year, that's pretty cool. So I'm chasing that. So I've been working on getting my bench press up, and I followed this bench cycle, which by the way is accessible both on my email list. So if you haven't gotten exactly what I followed as this 4-week bench cycle, I really, really, really enjoyed it. Just shoot me a message and I'll send the program to you. But I did this 4-week bench cycle. My PR had been 275. I got 285 pretty easily. The progress has been awesome. Now I know that first bit of progress comes a little bit easier. It's going to be that much harder to go 285 to 295 and then definitely 295 to 300. But it was a good step in the right direction. But this is where like the hybrid athlete in me is just like the reason that I love this style of training is because not only do I want to be competitive in my age group in the 70.3 this week, but like a part of me is just really going to enjoy that. Like, okay, but the guys that beat me, like he can't bench 285. He can't bench 285. He can't bench 285. And yes, there are some other hybrid athlete freaks out there, and maybe they're doing my race and I'll see one guy and be like, he might be able to bench 285. So I don't think that I'll be like the strongest of like the top 10, but that's what I love about this type of training and why I generally want to help the athletes that I help in not just like, hey, let's go crush a marathon, let's go crush 70.3, but let's do it while we build some muscle. Let's do it while we build some strength, because there's just something really cool about being like, hey, I did pretty good here. And at least on the eye test, like everyone that did beat me because they're not lifting weights. So, I got you covered there. That's just a fun way, at least for me, to think about, what does it mean to really be capable? What does it really mean to be like a well-rounded athlete? And yes, I come from the CrossFit world. I understand, and I think it's a very compelling argument to be that like those guys are the fittest on earth. But I just love the hybrid athlete idea because it like strips this like intense demand for like learning very complicated skills, which again, I'm not trying to diminish that. I think that that's in its own right, like makes you very capable and well-rounded. But I do just like this idea of like, how fast are you and how strong are you? Like, what's your endurance and what's your strength? And do you have both of those at a pretty impressive level? That's awesome. That's a cool thing to shoot for without, having to know how to do ring muscle ups or handstand push-ups or walk on your hands or do the Olympic lift. So that's just kind of the biased hybrid athlete in me. And that's something that I'm looking forward to, is hopefully being competitive in my age group and definitely feeling like it, if you beat me, at least I can lift more than you. So that's the competitive side in me, hoping to, hey, if I can make a podium, that'd be pretty cool. But I'm also going into it without any crazy, like, this needs to happen expectation. And for someone that's been competing for as long as I have, that's definitely been a change. I think that in the past I put a lot of pressure on these events that I would train for, and maybe I'll feel differently about the marathon later this year, because that is my quote unquote A race, and something that, does mean a lot to me. And I really want to qualify for Boston. I feel like I've been working towards this goal for forever, because I've trained 2 whole marathon blocks, and because of injury haven't gotten to the start line with each. So there's been a lot of build up there. So maybe I'll be singing a different tune come the marathon. But for this race, at least, yes, I want redemption. Yes, I would love to be well under 5 hours. Yes, I would love to be competitive in my age group. But I just want to go out there. I really don't want something outside of my control to, like, ruin the experience again. Like, I just want to have a clean race. But I think I'll be pretty happy with whatever ends up happening, given the fact that it hasn't been this very ideal build and training for it. And I also honestly want to finish and not be, like, just completely destroyed. If I can, I'm going to be running 13 miles, 13.1, after not running a whole ton for 4 weeks. I think if you look at my weekly mileage for last week, it might have been like, I don't know, like 8 miles, 9 miles. I think this week it might be minus the half marathon, like maybe coming up 10 miles. So I think that that's another big piece of it too. Like, I just want to not hurt myself, because I have to roll right into starting to build for this marathon. So that's another kind of big goal. So I think that as long as that happens, even if that means that I have to walk a good deal of the marathon or the half marathon because I feel something coming on, or my foot starts giving me issues, it like won't ruin my weekend. And I think in the past that wouldn't have been the case. I think that I am just trying to go out there and put my best foot forward, given the prep that I've done, and just let where the chips fall. Obviously I have goals, but I think that the difference now is that it's a goal, not an expectation, if that makes sense. Because when it's an expectation and you fall short, then that can be pretty disappointing. Obviously I want my goals to happen, but I also understand that, like, trying to get out there and put my best foot forward, and I've done some pretty good training to get there. I'm also hoping to have some good lessons learned from the whole experience that I can share with my athletes and on social media and on the podcast. Like, I'll do another episode next week, just completely recapping the event, and hopefully have a bunch of good news. And I'm trying to have a really good weekend with my family. Like, it's in Galveston. We have Moody Gardens right there. There's like a really cool aquarium that my son is like really excited to go to. My parents are coming. There's just so much more now to these race weekends than the race itself. And so that's, I think that puts everything else into perspective. And yeah, I'll just be happy to get it done and have a clean race. And that's my big hope. And whatever, kind of wherever the chips fall when it comes to the time and performance is something else. I did want to pull up, so I'm pulling up on my phone. So I was looking at these notes from the longer bike rides that I did this last training block, and I'm sharing it. And then I want to share some of the stuff that my coach sent me in preparation for this race as just kind of another example. Like, I think that guys, or maybe people listening, think I'm kidding when I talk about like carbs for this type of training and this type of racing. And yeah, so to give you a little bit of context, for a 3.5 hour training ride, and again, these are notes that I had from my last training block prepping for Waco. The reason I had pulled it up is because I haven't been doing too many of these long rides, and I wanted to have a baseline of how much nutrition to bring with me this weekend. So I based it off of this. But to give you an idea, I had 3 servings of Gatorade. So that's like 75 grams of carbs, 240 calories. I had 2 uncrustable PB&Js, another 420 calories. That's what I had before the bike ride. So that's total 660 calories just before going out to ride. Then during, so what I brought with me on the training bike ride, 7 servings of Gatorade, which is 560 calories in liquid carbs. one Uncrustable, so one PB&J sandwich, two high carb and caffeine gels. So I use Carb Fuel, that's the brand, and they have these gels that are 50 grams of carbs, and I think like 200 calories and 100 milligrams of caffeine. So I had two of those and two additional gels, so another 100 calories. So a total of 1,370 calories just during the 3.5 hour ride. Total, before and during my ride, I was having 2,030 calories, all primarily like very simple sugars. The PB&J obviously has some fat and some protein in it, but mostly just simple carbs. And I share this to say that you are limiting your performance if you aren't pushing the envelope on how much carb intake you can train your system to handle on these longer events. Now, 5K, non-factor, 10K, non-factor. Half marathon is where I would say it starts becoming something that you want to address in training and prepare for when it comes to race day. My coach sent me my nutrition plan for the race, so I'll share that with you guys. So what I'm going to be doing for my 70.3, and again, it's so nice to have a coach because yes, like, do I know these things conceptually? Of course. But when you're doing it for yourself, like, you so easily second guess yourself, or you're like, maybe if I do a little bit more, like, you're your own worst enemy when it comes to, and honestly, the more like knowledge you have on these things, on training, on nutrition, so on and so forth, like, the more likely you are to like mess things up for yourself because you think that you can like change things up, or like, oh, maybe this will be better. You want to experiment last minute. Like, I would be a mess trying to figure out a nutrition plan for myself, which is why, again, I obviously think that everyone could benefit from a coach, and why I really appreciate having my coach, Ryan Geiger from Geiger Coaching. So on the bike, I'm going to have a minimum of 4 cycling bottles worth of Gatorade. So my plan there is I have one bottle on my frame, and I have one of those like aerodynamic, like aero bar bottles with a straw. So I'll have both of those full. And then my goal is always to finish the aerodynamic one by the first aid station, and I'll grab, because they'll have in the aid stations, they'll have carbs there, and just completely like, fill up my aerodynamic bottle, because it has like a little hole up top, like that's exactly for that. So I'll refill that, and then I'll do that once again on an aid station. So essentially I'll bring 2 bottles with me on my bike full, and then I'll fill up 2 more bottles while I'm on my ride. I'm going to have 6 gels in total. So every 20 to 30 minutes, I'm having a gel. I'll probably have 2 of those that are the high carb ones and caffeine. 5 Hammer Endurolites or something similar, so plenty of sodium, and then 1 hot shot or something similar as you finish the bike. So last time, the one thing I'm going to change there is, so if you guys aren't familiar, hot shots are this like cayenne pepper drink, because the spicy, the hotness is supposed to like short circuit the thing in the back of your throat, I believe, that helps reduce the likelihood of cramping, which is something that I have had issues with historically. There's a lot of interesting science behind it, but essentially something spicy tends to help. I had this in the transition area last time, and I just think it's a better place to have it because, again, it's like spicy water. And last thing I want to do that is while I'm on the bike, I don't want to get it on me either. So that might be the only change there. So that's my fueling on the bike. So taking a step back from that, coach has me having my last pre-race meal 90 to 120 minutes before start time. Start time is at 7. So I believe that I'm going to set my alarm for 5. I usually don't sleep well the night before these races, but I'll probably wake up around 4:30, get that meal in. This is another big mistake a lot of people make, is making sure that your metabolism and your digestion isn't at an elevated state all the way leading up to the race. So you want to have that pregame meal and then nothing until come race day. So I'll wake up at 4:30. I'll have my pregame meal, something with 100 grams of carbs, and just kind of sip on some water and maybe some electrolytes. leading up to the swim. Then 15 minutes before the start of the race, I'll have a gel. So already one gel down the hatch. On the bike, we just went through all of that. Again, 4 cycling bottles of Gatorade, 6 gels in total. So at this point, we're at 7 gels total. And then Endurolights, which are just electrolyte tabs. And then on the run, I'm going to be having, 4 gels in total, one every 4 minutes. So now we're at 11 gels for the day, and 2 cycling bottle fluids in liquid, which is pretty much just taking, some sort of water at the feed table every single mile, like a sip here and there. So again, giving you guys an idea, we're looking at 11 gels worth of nutrition come actual race day. And if you think that you can do that without doing a lot of GI training in your training, that's how you end up with just like massive GI distress and either it blowing up your race or blowing you up after your race, which is just as bad, right? So going back to my notes from my training ride, if you look at it here, I'm having the equivalent of, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 7 gels in training just in the bike ride. You have to be pushing the envelope on this carb intake stuff if you want to optimize how you'll feel and how much fuel you have access to during that race, and be able to then match that, if not do a little bit more come race day. So wanted to share that because it's incredibly, incredibly important. When it comes to these long events, your glycogen and like liver carb storage, which is where you predominantly store carbs leading up to the race, like even if you do carb loading, which is, maybe a topic for a separate podcast, because I do think some people overdo it. Even if you're fully tapped on your glycogen stores the days leading up to the race, it's not going to last you for a 5, 6, 7 hour race, obviously. And if it's not going to last you, one of the big limiters to how you are able to perform, is at what point are you expending more than you can take in? So if you can train your body to take in and make more carbohydrate accessible, you're going to push when you bonk further and further down the line. So very big learning there, making sure that you're training for the nutrition aspect of, again, anything that's a half marathon or longer, and wanted to share exactly kind of what my plan is here. That, again, is very nicely put into an email, exactly what I do, whether we do that on a call or via an email with the athletes that I work with, because it's important and it should just be taken out of your hands, not something that I want to have to figure out, something that I want an objective third party that has been keeping track of my training, keeping track of how I do with carbs, keeping track of how I do with nutrition, and can just give me a like, hey, here's the plan, here's how we're going to do it. So definitely wanted to share that. Man, can't believe it's race week. It's going to be fun. So cool. I'm excited to get on the mic next week and hopefully have a very positive experience with some lessons to share with you guys. So excited to race, excited to get out there. I know it hasn't been an ideal build up to it, but sometimes I feel like when you go into it and there really isn't this like pressure to perform, is when you tend having your best races. So I'm going to go out there. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to hammer the bike and hopefully not get a flat tire. That's the goal. So yeah, I appreciate you guys. If you have any questions, I know a lot of people are signed up for like right around fall races, big time for half Ironmans, for marathons. If you've been listening to this and like you're thinking about reaching out about coaching, I posted on my stories the other day because I was going through the events that I currently have athletes signed up for, and it is so cool. We have the Kansas City Marathon, we have the Maine Marathon, New York City High Rocks, half marathon in June, the Michael Murphy half marathon in June, 70.3 Wisconsin, 70.3 Quebec, Olympic triathlon, 70.3 Jones Beach. So these are all events that athletes that I'm working with are like currently signed up for. The October Hartford half, just really Bayshore Marathon. That's the one that I'm doing. I have an athlete that's doing that as well. The way he's progressing, he might beat me at this point, which is incredibly bittersweet for me. The Haunted half marathon in October. Just going through like my master list of guys that I'm working with and the races that everyone's training for. It's going to be a really exciting year. And if you're training for a fall marathon and you're still just trying to make it work with a templated program, training apps, and don't feel like that's going to help you reach your potential, if you don't think it's really what's going to get you to where you want to go, if you want a more complete approach that's going to cover nutrition, race day strategy, lifting, so that you can go out there and anyone that beats you, you can look at them and be like, you beat me, but I can probably lift more than you. If that's how you want to train for this race, if you want to get to your race prepared, feel good, put out a performance that you're proud of, and get to the finish line and not feel beat up, be able to enjoy that rest of that day with your family, not be completely destroyed and sore, and you want to put on muscle and strength while you do it and have a ton of fun, reach out, because we are having so much fun preparing for these races. These guys are killing it. We're having such a good time getting some like awesome pump sessions, quality speed workouts, bike workouts. Everyone's starting to swim now that's doing triathlons in the fall. It's just been a really, really fun build for my athletes, like watching them progress and their FTP scores go up and their time trials go down on the runs. Yeah, like if you want to be a part of that, reach out. If you're not even signed up for a race yet and you just want to like, really dive into custom hybrid training so that it puts you in a position where you can sign up for anything and crush it, reach out. But yeah, I hope it was useful for me to share kind of like race week prep, what I'm thinking about. Last thing I'll talk about is taper. So one thing that I've learned about myself and my coach has learned about me, because this is the second or third specific race prep that I've done with him, is I really don't do well with a very like extensive taper. I don't feel sharp. Like I get very sluggish if I pull back on the volume and intensity significantly. So we're keeping the intensity pretty high this week. Obviously volume is way down, but hit a pretty hard trainer ride today, but it was just 45 minutes. Whereas we've been doing hour 20, hour 45, 2-hour workouts. So a lot less volume, but pretty high intensity tends to work well for me. I still feel sharp. I still feel fit. I still even psychologically just see numbers that make me feel like I'm primed and ready to go. So that's the type of taper that I end up doing. I'm still lifting this week. I lifted on Sunday, lifted very heavy. That's when I tested my PR, got to 285 bench, lifted again on Tuesday. I'm going to lift again tomorrow on Thursday, just doing some light like dips, pull-ups, just getting a little bit of pump, doing some core, something about like getting a really good pump in that just like, again, helps me feel sharp and primed for what's coming. And again, it's one of those things where if you haven't been lifting, obviously, you haven't been lifting hard, and then you still lift on your race week, not ideal. You're probably going to get sore. It's going to impact you. So it's all relative, right? Like I've been lifting very hard. I've been lifting very heavy. So this, if anything, feels like a big reprieve from what I've been doing, but definitely something that I continue to do during my taper week. We're going to take a pretty easy day on Friday. So Friday, I'm only going to swim and do like, I think it's an easy bike ride is what he has me doing. Let me pull it up so I can share it with you guys. All right, so taper week has looked like this. Monday, I did a swim. Yesterday, I did some run walk intervals and a really like a lift, but it was a pretty light lift. Today, I did that 45 minutes. So today's Wednesday, I did that 45-minute bike ride. Pretty intense, but short. Tomorrow, I have a run, just an easy run, and then I might do some strides and stuff. I'm having, like I said before, some of those like aches and pains from just getting back into running. So don't want to push it too hard, but I'll run tomorrow. Friday, I'm going to do a 30-minute, just super easy spin, and I'm going to swim. The swim, I'll probably do pretty hard. Again, I like feeling sharp, feeling primed. Like if anything, I want Friday to feel like, oh yeah, I'm ready to crush that swim. So I'm not going to take it easy on the swim, but again, swim is pretty not physically demanding for me. So that'll be Friday. And then Saturday, it's a 45-minute like little like ramp session on the bike on the trainer. Again, very low volume, but there'll be some intensity in there. Like I'm looking at the power numbers he wants me to hold, and they're not shabby. Like it's going to be like, all right, let's feel sharp, but just like 1 minute at a time and then come back. So I love that approach. That's what works well for me. And again, you have a coach worth his salt. You'll figure out exactly what's working for you and what's kind of ideal, how much taper you need. Do you taper the week before and then ramp back up the week during? So that's my plan for this week. If you want to talk coaching, let me know. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a rating, a review, and then I'll be on the bike next week to debrief the race and hopefully have some good news to share for you. But I appreciate you guys. Thank you for listening. Episode 7. See you guys next time. Bye.